Unbelievable. That's right, folks. This Jim Ross book kind of hits right here. But what doesn't is that I've actually been going through some stuff, folks. But I can tell you this right now. Regardless of what's going on in my life, nobody else and nothing else will ever be the reason why I don't do what I do here. And speaking of crazy, we're going to talk about Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown's supposedly been working out for some NFL football teams. And not only that, there's two teams that have a strong interest in him. And I can tell you this right now, those two teams fit him like a gem. The only problem with Antonio Brown is that he can't get his mind right. If Antonio Brown can get his mind and head right, he has the chance to be one of the greatest wide receivers in NFL history. And I honest to God do believe that, because I think that he has something special and he could bring football something special. He just has to learn how to behave himself. We're going to talk about these two teams, what I think about Antonio Brown and the whole situation. Hit the like button, subscribe, stay right here, because simply no one else does it better. A synonym for Antonio Brown would be highly explosive yet highly unpredictable. Antonio Brown's mental state and everything that he's done has led him to this situation. A lot of people will say, I have no sympathy for Antonio Brown, and you really shouldn't. His temper, his bipolarness, or whatever it is, Antonio Brown, 90% of what he has done has caused him to be in this position. The position of not being on a football team, the position of being looked at with an awkward eye from other NFL teams, the position of being what could be the best wide receiver in football with God-given talent, who's sitting on the sidelines because of his own wrongdoing. But there's been reports that have come out over the last couple of days about Antonio Brown quietly potentially working out for NFL football teams, and two teams that seem to have shown somewhat of an interest for Antonio Brown, not only for Antonio Brown, but two potential landing spots for Antonio Brown that he would probably go to. Now, I first heard a report of these two teams, the Seahawks and the Ravens, but I'm hearing now that the Ravens may be an unlikely destination for Antonio Brown. I'm going to walk you through this article right here, and this article is off of NBC Sports, and it says the Ravens are an unlikely destination for Antonio Brown. It says Antonio Brown is yet to receive clearance from the NFL, and when he does return, the receiver likely finds a limited market awaiting him. A report Tuesday indicated that the Ravens and Seahawks have had internal discussions about signing Brown, but another report Wednesday downplays Baltimore's interest. Brown's name has come up in Baltimore. Josina Anderson reports, but Brown has not been earnestly discussed, nor has been any recent talks internally at the time would count as Baltimore as a future destination. Brown has worked out with Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson and wideout Marquise Brown in South Florida this offseason. So he's obviously has, I would assume, to be potential close ties to Lamar Jackson and Marquise Brown. Antonio Brown faces league discipline after pleading no contest to burglary and battery in connection with an altercation with a moving truck driver. The league continues to investigate two other incidents involving Brown for further discipline. Brown has not played since September 15th. The only game that Brown played last year was for the Patriots, and I believe he had like 4 receptions and 56 yards. Antonio Brown, don't think he's going to go to the Ravens. I thought at first, Antonio Brown would be fun to watch on the Baltimore Ravens, and I think that that's something that a lot of us think. I think Antonio Brown, with the receiving core they have and just the system that the Ravens had that really exploded into the NFL last season, I think Brown would have been a really fun guy to watch on the Ravens. Now, it's hard for me to see Brown anywhere because he has so much going on that a lot of it is what he caused. Not only is it his attitude, he has pending charges against him that have not really met with progress. It was bad enough, the rape allegations, which don't seem to go anywhere. Again, I don't know too much on that, so I won't speak on that. But beyond that, it's his attitude, it's his situation. Antonio Brown last year was on he went through 2 teams and played 1 game. The Raiders gave him a chance. He had a little bit of an injury. He was having problems on the Raiders. He had the helmet situation, which wasn't so much him being a jackass. It was just kind of how he felt. Then there was what we're being told was a physical altercation with the general manager of the Raiders that he apologized for. The Raiders tried to give Antonio Brown every possible chance to succeed, and the guy just wasn't going to take it. The Raiders eventually announced that they were going to cut him. He went on his Instagram or Twitter, made some video of him celebrating, acting very childish after his release from the Raiders. Somehow, someway, Bill Belichick, being the mastermind that he is, knew the talent that Antonio Brown had. He signed Antonio Brown to the Patriots. Antonio Brown played a game with the Patriots. He had a decent performance. the rape allegations came out. Now, we didn't know if they were true or not. We still don't know if they're true or not to this day. Patriots cut him. Belichick or whoever got a wrong feeling about him. And from what I know, AB and Tom Brady were close. Tom Brady was excited to have AB on the team. Had AB stayed on the team, Patriots could have, they didn't have a terrible season, but obviously that first round loss to my Titans was, it was part of the problem with the Patriots was their weapons. They didn't have the weapons they were used to having. Tom Brady seemed like he was losing a step, and Brown could have really helped that team. But again, that happened. He talked about not wanting to come back. The NFL's not ready for me, and he just have had so many Twitter discussions. And then the burglary and battery charge. So NFL teams are looking at AB and they say, well, this guy is so talented, but he's a mess. Antonio Brown's the type of guy that could be a game changer for your franchise, or he's the type of guy that could ruin the chemistry and destroy the locker room environment. Antonio Brown is very tricky. I don't think any team that is a legitimate Super Bowl contender should take a chance on Antonio Brown, because I think that it's a very high risk and very high reward. But I think the risk is much higher than the reward. And by that I mean is that I think Antonio Brown is still a ways away from getting into the right headspace. And I think that no matter what team he's on, he's going to feel how he feels. He then called out Robert Kraft. Now, Robert Kraft kind of deserved to be called out a little bit, but he started to say things about Kraft and the Patriots. The Steelers was where Antonio Brown has had his longest tenure. He had 9 fantastic seasons with the Steelers. Some of the chemistries began to come out at the end. He got frustrated. He then threw Big Ben and everybody on the Steelers under the roof. He eventually apologized for this, but again, things that were said were still said. So the problem with Antonio Brown is his explosive attitude and unpredictability. I think that he has some type of mental illness, or he suffers from some type of bipolar thing. I don't know exactly. I'm not in his head. I'm not his family. I don't really know him. A lot of people are going to call me insane, but I think that very, very deep down, I think that he has a good heart, but I really don't know what is going on with this guy. I really don't, and a lot of us are trying to figure that out as well. Now, the other team that had potential rumors that seem like they are still very interested is the Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks, this is from CBS Sports. Seahawks discussing potential Antonio Brown signing while Ravens unlikely to pursue receiver. It seems like the Seahawks will be the front runner right now. Before I get into that, I want to talk about the Saints also. Going into the playoffs last year, Antonio Brown did work out with the Saints. I don't know if the NFL cleared him or whatever, but that did not go through. Antonio Brown did not did not go through, but I tell you what, Antonio Brown next to Michael Thomas in a playoff game would be very hard for any defense to stop, because the problem is they are so damn good as wide receivers. Article says Antonio Brown's unclear future as it relates to the possible NFL suspension may not stop a team from signing him at some point during the season, or at least in the beginning to appear that way. The Seahawks and Ravens have had internal discussions about signing the All-Pro receiver. NFL Network's Michael Silva reported on Tuesday Brown, who recently served a 2-year probation after pleading no contest in his moving truck driving battery case, is still under investigation following his inclusions in the civil suit from the woman accusing him of sexual misconduct and rape. Antonio Brown last year was a fiasco because of his off-the-field issues, maybe facing a suspension about half a season, Silver said, but he's an exceptional talent. He's been reasonably quiet on social media lately, so teams are sniffing around. I would keep an eye on the Seahawks. Brown's been doing some off-season workouts with their backup quarterback, Geno Smith. They are absolutely interested in having him potentially as a late-season addition, assuming there is a suspension. And the Ravens, his cousin on the team, they have sniffed around the past. They're mulling over that too, so internal discussions are so on and so forth. Ravens GM, during a recent interview, said on Mad Dog Radio he did not rule out the possibility of signing Brown, who did plenty of damage against the Ravens during his 9-year run with the Steelers. Brown's younger cousin, Marquise Brown, caught 7 touchdown passes during his first season with the Ravens. Baltimore quarterback and MVP Lamar Jackson expressed support as he relates to possibly having Brown as a teammate. I'd be happy if they signed him, he said. He's a great player. He showed it each and every year when he was on the Steelers, but it's not my decision. So clearly the Ravens, or the top people of influence on the Ravens, have his support. I think Marquise Brown being on the Ravens is a good supporting foundation because he knows him on a little bit more of a personal level than other players would. John Clayton, ESPN Radio, reported last week about the Seahawks. Josh Gordon could be on Seattle's radar. Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson, who put up an MVP season, would love for the team to pursue Brown. As far as the receiver is concerned, the Seahawks consist of DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Philip Dorsett, along with rookies Freddie Swain and Kobe Parkinson, which is by no means a bad group. The Seahawks passing attack would certainly benefit from having Brown, who led the NFL in receptions in his 5 seasons from 13 to 18. Brown will be 32 on July 10th. He appears confident he will be on a roster sometime in the near future. Earlier this month, Brown hinted on his Instagram page that he will find his next NFL home sometime soon. In the meantime, he's continued to train in Florida, where he worked out with defensive back Deion Sanders. Some of this is actually news to me. I didn't know that Brown was actually making strides of improvement. They said he's been quiet on social media. Brown literally is in a position to where all he has to do is just keep his mouth shut. Keep his mouth shut. Don't say anything. Let the critics talk. Do all of that. If he keeps his mouth shut, a team will sign Brown. Brown will play for a team. Now the problem is suspension as well. So now that I look at it and I read this article, it would appear to be that Antonio Brown would get signed by a playoff contender. Even though earlier in this video I completely crapped on him being signed by a playoff contender, it appears that would make the most sense. Why would it make the most sense? Because if his suspension is a lengthy one of 12 plus games for the 2020 season, the teams that are playing in week 14, 15, and 16 that are 3 and 10 don't really have much of a reason to sign him. But that also would be a lot of time off the field for Brown, but a lot of people are saying that Brown hasn't lost a step. I personally think that he probably hasn't lost a step. For me personally, I think if he's going to sign with anybody, for some reason I think the Seahawks are going to sign him because they already have a good passing offense. Brown would benefit that. He's in Seattle. There's some good people over there that can try to guide him in the right direction. I mean, I know he worked in Oakland and New England also, but I think that Seattle would make a lot of sense. I don't know about Baltimore. I don't know. But teams are clearly interested. Hopefully he's keeping his head right, and I think that he needs to continue to work out with some of these Hall of Fame guys because these guys have been through the rigors. They know what it's like, and he clearly respects them. So I think the best thing for him would be to surround himself by old talent or people that can get his head and mind right. I could see Brown really having fun on the Ravens. I think there's a lot to offer there. Seattle as well. But it's going to be very interesting to see where it goes. That's my video for today, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's a little bit of a short one. Appreciate everybody watching as always.